The year 2017 saw a break of hopefulness amongst us investors and consumer, in spite the confusion sparked by CEO Trump cards at first year in office space. The CEO strode of one policy tempest to the following as he took an axe to lot of the policies of the Obama authority, but, on the economical front line, the water could barely been smooth. Yearly economical increase has been a wholesome 3% time the joint state stockpile marketplace is up about 25% on the year. It is real how the buck is downward approximately 10%, that makes the actual growth in steak prices a slight less than spectacular, but the superior trust of lot Americans is unfeasible to reject. On to the U.S. political economist Erwin Steltzer, of the Hudson Institution. It is the low joblessness bet of 4.1%. How is the key element? Down there are 6 million blank jobs in the joint state at the time, he says. Down there are labor shortages, salary include begun to crawl up a slight bit following a length time of creature plane, and how makes human beings merry, makes consumer merry, makes consumer sure. Down there's as well a mental effect of CEO Trump card, he says. In industry human beings now awake up each night encouraging the government will do thing for them, quite rather than to them. Down there's a lot of the Trump card impact how is adverse in the industry society, he adds. They're uncomfortable by his, shall we urge it, unstable behavior. But the regulating material, the abolishing, the hilly behind, not just of the regulation themselves, but of the technique of enhancing the regulation has very emboldened the industry society. But not all thinks how the main image is as continuous as it looks. The ex-Democrat U.S. Exchequer Registrar Larry Summers has named U.S. increase a blood sugar top, resultant of a interim increase of a weaker buck. Mr. Summers says the U.S. desperate as necessary more than by the government conducting on roads, airports and bridges, and on humane equity and scientific. In spite the force of both of the US and Europe economies, down there was yet lot of testimony in 2017 how lot voters since the remnant of the economical restoration include not been quite allocated. In the UK general poll the leftward wing policies of Labour's Jeremy Corbyn won lot more than votes rather than anticipated. In Germany's poll centrist parties executed hardly. Time in France, the Narodnik domestic front line won a tertiary of the votes in the definitive circle of the president poll. 2017 was a year while the brutality of the environment wreaked horrible desolation in the Americas. Storm Irma was the powerful Atlantic pelvis storm always written, its winds corrupt 95% of the buildings on the Caribbean isle of Barbuda. Meantime Storm Maria inflicted tens of billions of dollars of harm to Puerto Rico. No solitary weather occasion can be finally related to changes in the environment. Though so, the horrifying pictures of desolation concentrated minds once again on the brittleness of Earth-land. CEO Trump card announced he was planner to drag the U.S. out of the Paris Environment Treaty, though lot reasoned how the go would do slight distinction to the factual standard of U.S. emissions, as the nation's charcoal-fired force stations are no much longer economically sustainable and are potential to go on to be closed downward in any case. In supplement, cities and state in the U.S. told they would click on in efforts to cut emissions. Environment scientists ended the year by supplying the bad news story how alleged full world emissions of the hothouse Gazette carbon sequestration dioxide are growing once again following a decrease in the early 3-year. The Environment Campaign participant Jonathan Porritt, of Message Board for the Next, says he believes how China is start to encounter the problem of decarbonizing its economics, in aspiring targets for sunny, breeze and afforestation, landing billions of trees. By difference, he was largest worried by the position in India. India is a enormous economics and increasing quick, and in several respects, could be more than of a destabilizing element rather than each the USA or China. Mr. Porritt as well thinks down there is a enormous communication and betrothal problem in persuading common human beings in wealthy countries to changing their behavior to halt them flyer to lot and consuming to lot flesh. He points out how flesh manufacture accounts for on 6% of world hothouse gas emissions, time the effect of flyer is on 3% of world emissions. The numbers of human beings flyer continues to growth by 7% a year, a growth he regrets. I've ever reasoned how aircraft is departure to be the hardest nut to fracture. We're blocked in a way of lifetime now. How makes flyer really inexpensive and really lightweight for human beings. Erwin Steltzer of the Hudson Institution says how he remnant frustrated how down there is now slight policy supporting for a world carbon sequestration tax that could ensure a consecutive stimulus to decarbonize the economical framework. I believe all is in favor of someone else reduction emissions, he says. It was an historical year for Zimbabwe, that saw the retire of CEO Robert Mugabe, who had run the nation with the end of whites guideline in 1980. John Robertson, an political economist and reporter who has been in the nation through the time, says Mr. Mugabe's policies ruined a significant portion of the nation's efficient power. Same by the government did horrible harm to characteristic rights and to civilian rights, he says. We are now utilizing less human beings rather than we did 37 years ago while the nation became freelance and for how period the people has almost dual.